a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back to the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and we're coming to you live and around the world from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the X Zone Broadcast Network, our growing family of broadcast affiliates right around the world, and our good friends at TalkStreamLive.com. If you'd like to send an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or to me right here in the studio@xzoneradiotv.com, and all social media sites, X Zone Radio TV, and our radio website at www.xzoneradio.com. You can also join our growing Facebook group page at www.facebook.com/groups/X Zone Radio TV. My guest this hour, X Zone Nation, is Debi Chestnut, and we're going to be talking to Debi, who has written a couple of books, Is Your House Haunted? And also Something Wicked, Stalking Shadows, Ghost of Anchor Bay. Debi has been able to see and speak to ghosts her whole life. She's a paranormal researcher with more than 25 years of experience. She gives lectures and conducts workshops to help people better understand paranormal activity. She resides in Michigan, and you can visit her online on her Facebook page, The Paranormal Realm. And Debi Chestnut, welcome to the X Zone.
Hi, Rob. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good for an old guy. Tell me, what was it that led you, Debi Chestnut, to be doing all the work that you're doing within the paranormal community for over 25 years now? Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think it started when I was 6 years old and met my first ghost. I mean, I was hooked. That was it. And I got older and went to college, and one of my professors was a parapsychologist, and I hooked up with him, and he's the one that got me started ghost hunting. And it's just history from there. I mean, I took a little break when my kids were little, to raise them, and I didn't want to have something follow me home and have to deal with that with small children.
Tell me about that first ghost sighting you had at the age of 6 years old.
His name was Nathaniel, and he lived on the second floor of my great aunt's house, which was used just for storage. And as a little kid, it was a fabulous place to play. And I used to go up there, and there was a young man up there, and we just talked, and he was happy to have a friend. And it took me a while to realize that he was a ghost. And no one believed me, and that was fine. It was like my secret friend.
Right.
I got older, and my aunt died. My dad sold the house. And when I got married, my dad actually bought the house back, and I moved into the house when I got married. And the first thing I did was run upstairs to see if Nathaniel was there. And he was, and he met me at the top of the stairs. And he gave me a hug, which is kind of like walking through Jell-O. And, I was fine with him being there. And then my son started to talk to him when I had kids. And my son started to talk to him. And I said, you really need to go into the light. And he had been alive in the 1800s. And he had been mentally challenged. And back in those days, they were kept locked up and away from society, and they'd been ridiculed when they were out, and he was afraid to leave because he thought he'd be ridiculed in death,
right,
as he was in life. And it took me a lot of convincing to get him to go, because I told him he would be made whole, and no one would make fun of him. And he finally left, and the day I moved out of the house, I was the last one there, and I went upstairs just to make sure everything was gone. And when I turned around in my daughter's room, Nathaniel was standing at the doorway, and he was healthy and he was whole. And he said, "Thank you." And I said, "You're welcome." And He said, see you when you get here. And I said, okay. And that's the last I've seen him.
Wow. Tell me, what did your husband say moving into a house that was haunted and that you actually knew the haunting spirit since you were a little girl yourself?
Well, that was pretty funny because he's an engineer and he says everything can be explained by science, but he couldn't explain things that happened in the house because there was more than one ghost there. There were
Really?
actually 3 ghosts in that house.
So what kind of paranormal activity was there in the house?
Well, there was Nathaniel who would walk down the hallway, and until we carpeted, it was wood floors. You could hear those.
Right.
And there was one spirit that was very fond of heavy metal, and about 3 o'clock in the morning, the stereo would turn on full blast and on heavy metal, which neither one of us listened to. And it got to be kind of a joke. We'd argue over who was going to get out of bed and unplug the stereo system.
Well, wouldn't it make sense to unplug the stereo before you went to bed if you didn't want
We
to be
never
disturbed?
thought of it because he worked 3 to midnight.
Right.
I had 2 little kids. By the time, both of us went to bed, we were just exhausted and we didn't even think of it. You'd smell Chantilly perfume everywhere in the house. And that's what my great aunt wore. And I only know it was Chantilly because I'm allergic to it. And I'd start to sneeze and then I'd smell it.
Oh, my gosh.
And I'd smell it around the baby's cribs every once in a while. And I'd smell it in the dining room where she used to sit and do her crossword puzzles. And other people would smell it and say, what is that? And I'm like, oh, it's just my aunt. Don't worry about it. She's just in to say hi. Pictures would switch on the walls every once in a while. You'd leave. They'd be in one place. You'd come back. They'd be switched. And that was my grandmother, because the great-grandmother, because those were her pictures that she had painted. And I kept on moving them back. And then finally I asked someone in the family, where did she hang these pictures? Well, she was moving them where she had them when she was alive and lived in the house. She built the house. So I gave up. I just left those there.
Did Nathaniel's appearance change over the years?
Not to me.
No.
Not to me. It was like he was stuck at the age that he had died, which, if I had to guess, would probably be 18 or 19.
Now, when you would communicate with Nathaniel, how would it be? Telepathically, or would it be, would other people be able to hear Nathaniel talking to you?
No, it was all telepathically. My parents used to hear me talking to him.
Right.
And they'd come upstairs and go, who are you talking to? I'm like, I'm talking to Nathaniel. And they said, who's Nathaniel? I said, he's my friend. And can't you see him? He's here. And it was so frustrating.
I imagine so.
Because I thought everyone could see spirits. And then I found out really fast that, no, that's not the case. And so then I just started to talk to him telepathically.
Why do you think that you were given the gift, that you were able to communicate with Nathaniel, that you were able to identify your great-grandmother as the one switching the pictures, and that you were able to add the fragrance of the Chantilly and the other things that were going on in the house to equate it to that being your aunt?
Just because that was the perfume she wore. But I think I was given the gift because I think that it took me a long time to get it. I think because I'm supposed to help other people that are having problems with the paranormal or don't understand the paranormal. I think a lot of how I view my job as a paranormal researcher is to educate other people and help other people.
As a paranormal researcher, what type of research do you partake in?
We try a lot of things.
Who's the we?
Our team.
And how many? What's the name of your team?
I'm with 2 teams actually. I'm with Black River Paranormal and Shadow Stalkers Paranormal, which is my team.
All right, let's talk about your team. How many members do you have in Shadow Stalkers?
Shadow Stalkers, we just actually started it. It's my cousin, I, and about two or three other people.
So,
And then I've been with Black River probably 10 years.
mhm.
And then there's another team I work with, A&J Ghost Hunters. But we all work together. Like if we have a big investigation, um, we know we can call the other team and they're going to be there and they're going to help. And we don't have the drama and we don't have the one-upmanship. And we just all work really well together. We all get along.
All right, let's talk about your team tonight,
Okay.
okay? What kind of research? Now, when somebody talks to me about research, I can see the scientific method being implemented,
Hmm.
everything well documented, people who have researched. They've got degrees. They've gone to school to take up certain aspects of research, chemistry, biochemistry, quantum physics, and so on and so forth.
Right.
So, when you and your team go out to do research, how do you conduct that research?
We're really working right now, actually, with ley lines and the effect the ley lines are having as it correlates with paranormal activity. Um, we're kind of taking all the investigations we've done, the
Hmm.
ones other teams we know have done that are legitimate investigations, and we're kind of pinpointing those on maps, and then we're overlaying it over the ley line grid. And we're noticing that in certain areas where these ley lines are, we're seeing an increased amount of paranormal activity. And we're trying to figure out, is it just because of the energy of the ley lines,
Hmm.
or um, are spirits traveling, using these for travel, and they're just following the ley lines because it's an easy way to travel? We're looking for the correlation.
And how long have you and your group been in researching the ley lines?
Oh, probably for the last 3 or 4 years. Um, we've also started to really do a lot of work. We switched all our flashlights and stuff to UV lights
Hmm.
um, to see if there's a correlation and an increase in activity with UV lights as opposed to normal flashlights. And we're finding that we are seeing more activity now that we're starting to use those. So we come up with different theories, and then we go out and we try to test them, and we try to learn more and discover more.
Okay, so over the past 3 years that you and your group have been doing research into the correlation between ley lines and paranormal activity, what have you found?
Um, we found that in areas, especially areas that have, like, let's say you have a triangle and of ley lines,
Hmm.
or some area where ley lines, it's usually a small area, where it's completely surrounded by ley lines. We're finding a little more activity in those areas than outside of those areas. We're also finding where a lot of ley lines intersect. We call them wagon wheels, because you could have 6, 7, 8 ley lines all intersecting in one spot. Um, that's like ground zero in some cases.
So how do
For
you how do you establish the location of a ley line?
there's ley line maps on the internet, and we've studied those. We take them with us.
Hmm.
Um, we get as close as we can. Um, we also have someone on our team who's a dowser, and we find that if he's using his dowsing rods, um, and he gets close to a ley line or something like that, that's kind of what we're doing. We're still trying to perfect that area, but we figure we've come pretty close. I mean, we know where the ley lines intersect. We know the areas where that little triangle or whatever shape it is, we have that pinpointed down. So we try to concentrate on one little area at a time.
So what kind of equipment do you use when you go out to do your research? You talked about the different flashlights that you've switched over. You
We
talk
switched
about
over to those. We use the
yeah.
normal things. We use wireless DVRs. We use EMF detectors. We use Geiger counters.
Why would you use a Geiger counter?
we're just looking for little changes. We're this is something new, and we're not very far with it yet. We're trying to see if a Geiger counter reacts to a ley line, or when we're in an area where there are ley lines.
Geiger counter only reacts to, radiation.
Radiation, I know, but we're noticing some changes, and we're trying to figure out where it's coming from.
Okay.
Whether it's coming out of the ground, we have to take account all the environmental things around us. It's a rather big undertaking for our team, but we're kind of encouraged with what we've learned so far.
So where do you take this information that you find to get it validated? Do you work with a member of a scientific community somewhere? Do you work with a university? Do you work with a...
Not yet. We're still want to gather more information, and eventually we will. I do talk to my husband about it a lot.
Uh-huh.
Say, can this do this? Can this do this? And he's pretty good about answering those questions. And some stuff he's like, I just don't know. So we're trying to get everything together, gather as much information as we can. And we'll probably end up taking it to one of the universities and have them look over our data and say, how is this working? Why is this happening? Is it the energy around the ley lines? What is it? And we're hoping, eventually we'll have something concrete. We're also, there was a show on, have you watched that show with Morgan Freeman, In Search of God?
I don't watch TV. I find it a waste of time.
He did this show, and he was talking to a neuroscientist.
Mm-hmm.
And they had discovered that when a person dies, and I don't know how they've measured it, that their consciousness lives on. They just don't know for how long. And we found that really interesting as well. I don't know what we're going to do with it yet, but, basically it just kind of said, we know consciousness lives on. So doesn't that kind of prove the existence of an afterlife or a ghost or a spirit or something like that? So that's something eventually we'll get to.
But I'm trying to understand why you are investigating ley lines, and you're now talking about ghosts and the life after death. You're talking about the energy of spiritual departure.
It's something we're just throwing around as we hear new things.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about it and make a note that, okay, we have to get to this. But, we're still really focused on the ley lines and how their energy is affecting paranormal activity, if at all.
Tell me about your book.
We feel it is.
All right, so tell me about your book, Is Your House Haunted?
Is Your House Haunted is a book for people that think they might have a ghost in their house. It walks them through how to debunk a ghost, a possible ghost, things to look for, things to check for. So we always go out looking for the logical explanation. And if they can't find one, it breaks down the different types of ghosts and spirits and some of their behaviors, and hopefully helps them identify it. There's a chapter in there on how to keep a journal of paranormal activity, when to call a paranormal researcher, how to find a good paranormal researcher. There's a chapter in there on psychic children, how to talk to your kids about ghosts.
So there's a little bit of everything.
It's a little bit of everything. My husband calls it a tech manual.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about, you were saying in your book, you tell people about the types of different ghosts and spirits. Share that with our audience.
Well, there's a lot. There's your, like an avenging spirit. They think someone wronged them in life and they're going to come back and try to make that person pay. Like the movie Ghost is a perfect example of an avenging spirit. There's a poltergeist. They're the ones that are normally associated with throwing things, turning lights on and off, although a normal spirit can do that. There's, gosh, there's all kinds. There's, demonics, which we call humans. There's elementals. There's,
So there's quite a variety.
yeah, there's a ghost of a loved one or a friend.
Well, wouldn't all these different ghosts just be classified as ghosts?
They could be, but some of them show different behaviors. Like, the spirit of your grandmother's not going to come back and act like a poltergeist.
Well, isn't a poltergeist caused by a human being, mostly a male going through puberty?
It can be, but in cases where there's no teenagers present in the home and there's
What about
no type of
telekinesis?
spirit,
What about telekinesis?
we can ascertain.
What about the telekinesis with the people who are residing in the house?
It's a possibility. It's something we have to look at when we go out and investigate those. I've really only done where I can actually say that there might have been a poltergeist, maybe 2 or 3 of those in 30 years. We get a lot of residual hauntings where there isn't a ghost at all. It's just energy trapped in a time continuum, a loop. It just keeps replaying itself over and over.
Right.
And a lot of people, think their house is haunted with that, and that's what we normally run into. Most of the time we run into a perfectly rational explanation for what's happening in the house, like high EMFs.
Right.
And they're living basically in a fear cage. We just had a case like that.
All right, listen, you and I have to take a break at the bottom of the hour. Please stand by. Exonation, Debi Chestnut is our guest this hour. And on Facebook, she can be found at The Paranormal Realm. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and we'll be back on the other side of this break as we continue investigating the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. Debi Chestnut's our special guest this hour. We're talking about ghosts, hauntings, ley lines, things that go bump in the night. And Debi, if someone was to call you up and say, listen, Debi, my house is haunted. I think there's some strange, weird, wacky stuff going on here. My dogs are getting annoyed. My children are talking about seeing these things in their room. My wife saw a shadow in the kitchen. Debi, can you and your group come over and give us a hand? Tell us what we have going on here. How would you proceed?
Actually, we make myself and James, who heads up Black River. We actually go out to the house. We interview them. We talk to them. We have a rather lengthy questionnaire that we ask. We ask them a lot of questions. We do a walkthrough of the house. We listen to what they're experiencing. And then we go back and we take all the information we've learned. And if we think it's something, there's a logical explanation for it, we'll just take care of it while we're there. If not, if we're not sure, we'll make another time to come back, and then we'll go out and we'll do an investigation. And then once we've reviewed all the evidence and figured out what we're dealing with, if it is a spirit or something, we think it's something else, then we'll go back and have an exit interview with the family or whoever called us.
What are some of the questions that you would ask someone during your initial interview?
Our questions can be kind of intrusive. We ask if there's a lot of fighting going on in the house, if there's what kind of medications people are on in the house, if there's a problem with alcohol. We just try to get a feel for the family. Is the house clean? Is it chaotic? Are they kind of avoiding our questions? Are they being direct? We ask about where the activity mostly takes place, who was present, what did they experience. I depending on how old the kids are, I really try not to talk to the kids too much because I don't want to scare them.
Sure. Good point.
If they're older, then yes, I'll talk to them. But if they're, you know, 3 to 12, no way. I mean, I might ask them a little bit about it, like, tell me about, what you've seen in your room. And a lot of times they'll tell me, well, this is what I saw. And I'm like, okay, well, how did that make you feel? Were you scared? Just a lot of questions that aren't going to try to scare them even more, just to get an idea of what they're seeing. A lot of times kids will draw pictures of things they see.
Right.
And I always ask the parents if they've drawn any pictures of what they've seen. And, we look at those carefully because, in a lot of cases, if kids are scared, they're less apt to lie than if they're not scared.
Say that again. If kids are scared, they're less apt to lie?
When it comes to something like that.
Okay.
That's been my experience anyway. That's what I found. If, if something's really terrifying them and I tell them, look, I'm here to help you. And I want to know what you're experiencing and what you're seeing and how it makes you feel. A lot of times they're just relieved to have someone to talk to. I've also found some cases where there is something going on in the house and the parents don't necessarily believe in the paranormal or say, well, it's just their imaginary friend. And they kind of, I hesitate to say blow it off, but I think they're trying not to scare their kids. And then when you really talk to the child, you have to determine, depending on their age, do you know the difference between imaginary and real?
In your experience doing what you do, how many cases, or what would you say the percentage of non-paranormal cases are considered to be paranormal cases by the people who contact you? And how do you break it to them that, you know what, there's nothing wrong with this house, we find no evidence of paranormal activity? How do you break that to them?
Gently, depending on their attitude. So because I've talked to these people probably 5 or 6 times, I tend to know where they're coming from. If I feel they're going to be relieved, I just tell them flat out, there's nothing here. In a little bit nicer way,
Right.
but basically that's what I'm telling them. And they're relieved. If there isn't something there, but they think it is, then I'm a little more, Jen, like, look, we did all this. You were here. You saw what we did. We have no evidence that says there's anything paranormal. What we have found, like I had a case recently where they were convinced there was something paranormal and there wasn't. We had a fear cage. So I had to explain to them about high EMFs and the effect it can have on your mind and your body. And I was as gentle as I possibly could be with them and suggested that they, maybe you should get an electrician out here, have him try to fix this. This is where we found the problem, and this is where you're having all the activity. So a lot of times if you approach them with logic and can back it up with evidence, like, high EMF readings, especially if they've been following you around the house all night, they generally take it better. Some people you just can't convince. I've had a couple cases where I can't convince them there's nothing there. No matter what I say, no matter what I do, they're totally convinced. So I asked them if it would make them feel better if I did a house blessing or a house cleansing, and they're happy with that, and I do it, and they're happy. I found that in all the cases I've had, I have to operate within their reality, not my reality. I have to operate with their perception. And
Okay, you mentioned a fear cage. What is that?
a fear cage is when there's an area with very high EMF readings. A lot of times It's well, a lot of times you have a basement in the house and your electrical panel's down there.
Yeah.
A lot, if there's something faulty in that panel or something's not right, it can emit high EMF readings, and high EMF readings can make you feel like you're being watched. It can make you hallucinate. It can actually physically affect you in other ways. I had a case where a lady felt that, her legs were being touched and they were tingly, and that she'd been to a doctor and they couldn't figure out what it was, and they were seeing shadows and they would always feel like they were being watched. And
Are these people serious? Like,
yes,
do they have problems mentally?
I some of them I never met because they contact me by email and I call them and I kind of do a process of elimination with them, and everything they were telling me led me to believe that that's probably what they were dealing with. So I talked to the daughter, who tended to be a little more rational, and told her, I said, look, get an electrician out there. There's something wrong.
Yeah.
And she called me back a couple days later and said, you were absolutely right. There was something very wrong, and the EMFs were off the charts. And
so why would somebody go to a paranormal investigator instead of going to an electrician, calling in the county home inspector, instead of going to a psychologist or going to...
I can't explain that. I just know that a lot of people think that when these things happen to them and they can't explain them, that they're paranormal.
Do you think that the TV shows that are on TV that are anything but reality have something to do with this?
I think they've contributed a lot to it, actually. Because people watch these shows and, if they're rather impressionable and they're not familiar with the paranormal, they absolutely are going to believe that that's what it is. I still can't explain in 25 years where a lot of people who think their house is haunted automatically jump to the conclusion that they have a demonic.
Well, it's the new catch thing these days.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
This has been going on my whole career. Oh, well, my house is haunted, therefore it is a demon. No, back up the bus. No. I've been doing this, I don't know, 30 years, and I think I can say in 30 years, I've run across 2 entities I would probably maybe classify as demonic. Maybe.
So why do you do what you do? If you've been doing it for 30 years, why do you do it?
Because I love it.
Why?
Every case is like a mystery, and you have to put it together, and you have to solve it, and you have to go find the clues and the evidence, and
so it gives you a chance to kind of play detective?
Yeah, it's like the thrill of the hunt.
But you're dealing with people's lives here,
and I'm very careful with that.
You people aren't qualified psychologists. Is there a chance that by what you're telling these people, you may actually make, if they are suffering from any sort of mental illness, that you could actually elevate the problem?
There's always that chance. I happened to major in psychology when I was in college.
But did you get a degree?
No. No, I did not get my degree, but I'm very aware of that. I'm very cognizant of it.
So what do you do if that arises?
I try to find one of the family members that doesn't have what I feel might be a psychological issue, and I'll pull them aside and I'll talk to them privately and go, look, this is what I think is going on, and I really want to help you, but I really think you need to get this person to a medical doctor and a psychologist and have a full workup done on them, both psychologically and medically. And if they don't find anything, then call me back. I'm really careful about that. I don't want to make anything worse. Fortunately, I've only run into maybe 2 or 3 of those, where I've just pulled back and said, this is not feeling right to me. And I've talked to another family member and said, I really think this person needs some help, and I'm not qualified to do this, and you need to get them to a doctor. and
Sure.
or a psychologist.
So tell me, how does one's own religious beliefs affect the possession or the occurrence of paranormal activity within their home?
I'm not sure. I've wondered about that myself. I find that a lot of the homes I get called to,
Mm-hmm.
I say it's probably 50-50. Either they're extremely religious or they're not really religious. It's about half and half. And I try to, for the people that are extremely religious, I try to operate within their belief system, even though it might not be mine and I might not agree with it. But I feel that if they don't believe 100% in what I'm doing or what I'm telling them, that no matter what I do or tell them, it's not going to help them. So I try to operate within their belief system.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that kind of works a little better.
Do you work with a member of the clergy?
I do have a couple members of clergy I can call on.
I mean real ministers.
No,
real.
I'm talking real ministers.
Okay, because there are so many
No.
groups
I'm
that,
talking
that have.
fully ordained, have a
Okay,
church,
all right.
church and a
Do
that
you
are in organized religions.
do you use psychics?
I am one. So yeah, I use me. Um, I try not to use it a lot, and everything I say when I'm in a house and
Mm-hmm.
I'm picking up impressions of this house or the spirits that may be in there,
Right.
everything I say is recorded, and we have a researcher that goes through everything I said and tries to validate it through newspaper articles or public records or land records if I pick up names and dates. So everything that I say, we try to validate through some type of documentation. If we can't document it, we don't use it.
So who was it who came up with your research protocols?
It was kind of a team effort. We all come from such varied backgrounds.
Such as?
Um, James is an atheist. We have a Buddhist. We
No,
have
I
a
mean
Wiccan.
professions. I mean professions.
We have professions.
Yeah.
Um, wow. See, I'm trying to figure out what everyone does. I'm a writer.
And you're also a psychic.
Well, sorry, psychic. Yeah. James. I'm not sure what his background is. I
Eh,
know he's been very ill, so he hasn't been working. Jamie,
mhm.
not Jamie. Richard is Buddhist, and he's a massage therapist. We come from all different professions, and we just kind of got together and said, "Look, this is how we want to do it. We want to do it different. We want to do a lot the same." A lot of it was trial and error, figuring out what worked for us as a team. And we would go to places that were alleged to have spirit activity that didn't involve someone's houses or someone's lives,
Right.
and experiment with different things till we found out what worked for us. And we easily adapt. Like if we're in a situation and what we're doing isn't working, we'll meet excuse me, we'll meet outside and we'll go, okay, this isn't working, what else can we try? And then we brainstorm and come up with another plan, and then we go back in. So we don't have like set things we do. We will adapt if we have to.
And you say you've been doing this for 30 years?
Mm-hmm.
And you're still not sure of what works and what doesn't work?
I find that some things we know works.
Mm-hmm.
Some things we have to go on the fly because some situations are just so different. And some situations, some places are just so large. We were called out to this one museum. It's a house, and it's a huge house. There's 15 outbuildings. They were all brought in, all historical, all brought in from different parts of the state.
Uh-huh.
So there was a lot of things going on, and it took, a lot of time to figure out what energy was where it was coming from, and whether it was residual or whether it was intelligent.
Uh-huh.
And so we set up our normal protocol, and then if we had to adapt, we did.
Hey, listen, we've run out of time for tonight. I want to thank you so much for joining us. And X-Zone Nation, if you would like to get more information from Debi Chestnut, just go to Facebook. And you can find her on Facebook at The Paranormal Realm. Yeah. Or, let me see, she also has a website, Debi, Debi -chestnut.com. I would have thought, with over 30 years' experience, that she would have a few things down pat. And if I was going to have I'm putting this in quotations, a team, I certainly would know what they did, because their profession would be able to contribute to the validity and the strength of the investigation. Right, Craig? Make sense, buddy? Now, when we come back from the news at the top of the hour at 6.5 minutes past, Michael Savella is going to be joining me, and we're going to be talking about the astrology of politics. Now, this is a slow election year, right? Yeah, right. Uh-huh. So we're going to try our best to try and figure out what in the name of heavens is going on. Get it? Stars, heavens, planets. Listen, gang, I'll be back on the other side of this break. Whatever you, don't go away.